Hello there, good evening. It's been a turbulent few days for the Tories as members gathered for their party conference in Manchester, what looked like a divided Conservative party, with the Prime Minister under pressure from senior Tories over tax and transport. But today, Rishi Sunak's turn to take the stage. His message to the country that he was the option for change, announcing a new plan for education and plans to raise the age at which people can buy cigarettes. And it was finally confirmed that the leg of HS2 from Birmingham to the north has been scrapped, ending weeks of speculation and leaks. Sky's political editor, Beth Rigby, reports now from Manchester.
All this week, Conservative Conference has been trying to come to terms with a leader they didn't vote for. This a PM who's been battered from the fringe sidelines and beset by leaks preempting what he needs to be, a game-changing speech. Pulling out all the stops in the most personal of ways. This the first PM introduction by a political spouse since 2009.
Rishi and I are each other's best friends.
This is a reset for her as much as him, thanks to difficult coverage around Mrs Murty's tax affairs last year. This a couple now in election mode. His slogans, now hers.
Rishi, you know this. You know they're doing the right thing for the long term. Even when it's hard, is the right thing to do.
This a scene from a presidential playbook. This a Prime Minister making a personal pitch.
My story is a British story. A story about how a family can go from arriving here with little to Downing Street in 3 generations. Now, I am proud to be the first British Asian Prime Minister. But you know what? I'm even prouder that it's just not a big deal.
Today, all about connecting with voters, and it moved his Education Secretary to tears in the room. A speech as much about where he came from as where he wants to go next.
HS2 is the ultimate example of the old consensus.
Mr Sunak modelling himself as a reformer ready to take tough decisions. High-speed rail to the north, the first casualty.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project. And in its place, we will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country.
The PM delighted to have got it off his chest. Announcements too on smoking, with the legal age being raised by a year every year. And big reform in education, a new qualification system for 16 to 19-year-olds in England. And plenty of politics too. Goading Keir Starmer.
He is the walking definition of the 30-year political status quo I am here to end.
And trying to take Labour into culture war territory.
And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
What's going on here is this is a Prime Minister behind in the polls, asking you to take another look at him. All week he's been trying to connect with the party. This was a message to the country as he goes into the fight of his political life. Alex, hello. What did you make of the speech? Did he do what he needed to do?
It was bold, it was decisive, it was visionary, it's taking tough decisions. I thought it was a really important speech, and it's one that puts this country on a course to a better future. So, I thought it was amazing.
Do you think he's going to be able to get the public to give him another look now?
I hope so, and I think from what I've seen, there was a lot there which is really inspirational.
But key components of the PM's new Northern Network, in reality a rehash of previous Tory plans postponed or cancelled. The Prime Minister just delivered to deliver the Northern Powerhouse Rail in full, which runs through Bradford. The Chancellor canned this in the integrated rail plan.
Yes,
canned it.
Yes, we have, because his judgment is...
And then you're putting money into projects he cancelled.
The government's judgment is the £36 billion that we were going to spend on HS2 is better spent on different transport connections across the north of England, east to west.
They may be talking about the long term, but the battle lines are very immediate. Rishi Sunak, a man in a hurry. The countdown to the election is on. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, Rishi Sunak, as you heard there, confirming the money saved from HS2 will go towards hundreds of transport projects. But what is actually new? We've been taking a closer look. The PM then confirming that the high-speed link down from Birmingham to Euston will be completed, but he said the London station will be radically scaled back to reduce costs. The Manchester to Birmingham leg of HS2 will now be scrapped, along with the HS2 East leg. The government has instead offered investment in a series of transport projects called Network North. Instead, the Prime Minister has promised to protect the £12 billion line between Manchester and Liverpool, something that was previously announced as part of the Northern Powerhouse Rail project. As well as a host of local transport investment, Rishi Sunak has also re-announced projects like the electrification of the Transpennine route for areas like York and Manchester, the building of the Midlands Rail Hub for cities like Birmingham, and a new tram system for Leeds, all three of which were previously brought to the table in 2021. Under the new plans, the Prime Minister expects to have trains travelling from Manchester to Bradford in 30 minutes via a new line from Huddersfield and electrify lines to Sheffield and Hull to reduce journey times to 42 minutes and 84 minutes respectively. So what has driven the Prime Minister's decisions today then? In a word, cost. In 2015, it was thought HS2 would cost £55 billion. But 5 years later, reports have suggested that number could go as high as £106 billion, almost double. Rishi Sunak says £36 billion will be saved as a result of scrapping the northern leg, with all the money going into hundreds of new transport projects in the north. As well as rail upgrades, motorways and A-roads will be improved and bus fares kept at £2. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has been speaking to those people and businesses directly affected by those decisions.
In Manchester, only the trams were running. A strike shut the railways for a day, while inside a former station, the trains of the future were cancelled by a Prime Minister promising local links in place of HS2.
I am disgusted, but I'm not. Whatever the Tories do doesn't surprise me.
Well, I think he'd better do it, yeah. Needs improvement. I was waiting about 20 minutes for the bus this morning, never come.
It's sad and perhaps entirely unsurprising that it's the Manchester part that gets cancelled.
From the leaders who want high-speed rail to transport investment and opportunity north, there was fury.
It does not deliver that new line. It involves patching up existing lines and leaving us with a problem that still has not been fixed. So it doesn't work east-west, but nor does it work north-south either.
Businesses like this were counting on a high-speed boost. They make clean air units for the pharmaceutical industry. Watching the PM, the boss turned it blue.
I do feel like second-class citizens, but I guess if I were in Leeds, if I were in Liverpool, if I'm up in Scotland, I feel equally the same. It's like nothing exists past London, and how the hell somebody can come up to the heartland and say, oh, by the way, we're now going to chop you off. That's fantastic marketing.
HS2 will now end in Birmingham with a link to the West Coast Main Line, but it will now extend to Euston. A proposed £12 billion fast link from Liverpool to Manchester survives, enabling faster east-west travel. And the line to Hull will be electrified, all part of the third rail plan for the north in as many years.
In place of HS2, Rishi Sunak's promising more of this, better local transport links, and they'll doubtless be welcome, but it's less than 2 years since the government was promising it could do it all, and much of what he's promised isn't even new. So he may find that breaking the promise of high-speed rail to the north comes at a price in trust, in the time it takes to deliver these projects, and in the credibility of any infrastructure plan put forward by his government.
I just can't believe it.
This decision will cause chaos along the route, where families like the Froggates have endured compulsory purchase orders for land that may never be used.
The £36 billion that Rishi Sunak has announced is going to be spent on other levelling up projects in the north, which I think is wonderful. Can he just tell us or give us some clarity on how much money is going to be allocated in repairing the devastation and the work that HS2 have already done?
The government says the sell-off of HS2 land will begin soon, but Mr Sunak still needs the support of his northern MPs to get his plan through Parliament before an election that could yet put HS2 back on track. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Manchester.
Well, Sky's political editor Beth Rigby is in Manchester for us. A turbulent conference, perhaps, Beth, overshadowed by one decision. Did he pull it back today?
Well, Anna, it was billed as the Rishi reset, and you're right, at times this week it's felt more like the Rishi shambles. You had the HS2 announcement leaked, derailing the Prime Minister's big speech and ruining the conference choreography. You had Liz Truss on the fringes, in plain sight party divisions there to see. Her group of MPs now in Parliament that might vote against the Prime Minister or disagree with him number in 60. So he's got a problem there. And of course you saw this leadership parade with the likes of Suella Braverman really flexing her wares on stage for the delegates. So it was a tricky week. This day was his attempt to put it back on track, to take back control of the narrative and the agenda. And what was the big pitch? Well, in essence, it was that he was the change candidate, and HS2 was the pinnacle of that. And in a way, he's had a bit of luck with this tonight in that we've seen David Cameron, a former Prime Minister, come out and say it's the wrong decision. Now, in the past few minutes, Boris Johnson has retweeted David Cameron to say, I agree. So if Rishi Sunak wants to pitch to the public that he is a change candidate prepared to break the status quo and do things differently, that former Prime Ministers are disagreeing with him kind of proves the point. But the bigger picture here is that he has no option but to go at it this way into a general election. That's because the public want change. So all he can do is try to be that man. Now, given that the Conservatives have been in power for 13 years, it is, to say the least, an audacious bid. But he's prepared, we can see today, to really go for it.
Beth Rigby, thank you very much indeed. Well, the General Secretary of Scotland's Alba Party has confirmed to Sky News that a formal complaint has been submitted to Police Scotland over comments made by Rishi Sunak in his speech today. Chris McKelney alleges that the Prime Minister committed a contempt of court by commenting on an ongoing police investigation during his speech when he said Nicola Sturgeon may go down for very different reasons. Now, Sky News understands Metrobank is drawing up plans to raise hundreds of millions of pounds of new capital in a bid to strengthen its troubled balance sheet. Our city editor, Mark Lyman, joins us now. What should we be reading into this then, Mark?
Well, I don't think we should read too much into it at this stage, Anna, but there's no doubt that Metrobank is in a tricky position. Indeed, for most of its relatively short existence of just over a decade, it's had plenty of financial problems. It's been fined by the city watchdog for misleading investors, and it's had to go cap in hand to shareholders before. Now, as I understand it, it's trying to raise well in excess of £100 million by selling new shares to investors, and also it's going to have to raise significant amounts from the debt market as well. Now, the difficulty with the first part of that is that Metrobank's shares have fallen so far in recent times that it's now worth only about £100 million. So raising that sum again is going to be a pretty tall order. And as I understand it, tonight, Anna, the financial watchdogs and the Treasury are keeping a very close eye on Metrobank. It's got about 2.7 million customers. So while it's not one of the biggest players in British high street banking, it does still have a significant presence. And so it's understandable, I suppose, that in a precarious position like the one in which Metrobank finds itself, watchdogs are taking a very close interest in the progress of this effort to raise new capital.
Mark Lyman, thank you. An investigation carried out by the British Army has found that a 19-year-old soldier who is believed to have taken her own life received persistent, unwelcome attention and behaviour from her line manager. Gunner Jaisley Louise Beck was found dead at Larkhill Military Barracks on Salisbury Plain in December 2021. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, has spoken to her mother, who said she was concerned about what her boss was capable of.
Hey! Come back! Come back! Yeah! Jaisley Beck served as a gunner in the Royal Artillery. At 19, it's believed she took her own life. A causal factor in her death, an army investigation has found, was the relentless sexual harassment by her immediate boss, something she shared with her family.
You could tell that this was impacting her mood swings. You could tell that she was concerned about what he was possibly capable of doing.
The report details how in October 2021, the unnamed bombardier sent Jaisley 1,000 WhatsApp messages and voicemails. In November, it was 3,500. In December, Jaisley was dead. The inquiry concluded the harassment from her line manager left her in a very fragile state from which she appears not to have recovered. She was afraid of reporting the behaviour of her line manager as she feared she'd be seen as a serial troublemaker, having previously reported an incident of unwarranted sexual behaviour by a senior officer. Witnesses told the inquiry that inappropriate behaviour by male soldiers towards female ones was commonplace amongst a significant minority of soldiers, with women routinely receiving vile and degrading comments while socialising.
I'm kind of left feeling angry and not able to maybe say a great deal. Who's listening to us? This report's gone out. Is it us against the military? And it shouldn't be. This is our daughter. We knew her. To the point that it was us that raised our concerns to the military on our daughter's final day.
You think more needs to be done?
Sadly, I don't feel that there is enough support for soldiers.
In a statement, an army spokesperson said their thoughts were with Gunner Beck's family. It added that the army has endorsed all 18 recommendations in the service inquiry report, 15 of which have already been actioned. The remainder will be actioned by the end of December 2023 as part of our absolute commitment to improving and maintaining the safety of our people. Investigators say the aim of those recommendations was to prevent a repeat of what happened to Jaisley. As for her family,
it won't bring her back, but if anything I can gain from this is, even if it's me personally, I will support any female soldier that needs support.
she says she's heard from other soldiers, male and female, also victims. Supporting them, she says, will be Jaisley's legacy. Greg Milam, Sky News.
The former GB News contributor Laurence Fox has called the news channel a joke after he was sacked over comments he made on air about a female journalist. He was speaking tonight outside a police station where he'd been held in custody on suspicion of conspiring to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras. Also sacked by GB News was the commentator Calvin Robinson, who spoke to Sky News earlier. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer has more.
We've got 1, 2, you can show them. 1, 2, another 3 upstairs. Stealing, going through my house.
Arrested and sacked in one day.
This is what the police are. They don't police with consent anymore. They police with fear and intimidation.
Outspoken as ever, Laurence Fox had filmed police searching his home before his arrest on a completely unrelated matter.
So have a lovely day. I'm going to spend my day in the clink.
And while police interviewed him on suspicion of conspiring to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras, hours after his arrest, outside of Croydon Police Station, this was his response.
Where is the pastoral care from that news channel? It's not GB News, it's GB Joke. See you later.
His former employers confirming its internal investigations have now concluded and that GB News has ended its employment relationship with Laurence Fox and fellow presenter Calvin Robinson. Fox predicted last week his days were numbered after Ofcom received more than 8,800 complaints about the deeply misogynistic rant he made unchallenged on the Dan Wootton show, musing live on air what self-respecting man would climb into bed with a female journalist who'd appeared on a rival channel.
And embarrassing. Who'd want to shag that?
Calvin Robinson was fired for this lengthy social media post, critical of his bosses, standing up for Dan Wootton, who hasn't yet been sacked. Telling Sky's Mark Austin people should feel able to speak freely, even though he personally wouldn't say what Fox said.
I don't think that conversation was appropriate. I wouldn't have had that conversation. But this is his style, and they knew that when they hired him. So they knew exactly what they were getting. So which brings the question, why did they fire him and say they're a station for free speech?
For the self-styled home of free speech, the Sackings sends out a statement.
With 12 active Ofcom investigations, bosses at GB News know that in order for things to return to normal, they need to take some of the heat out of all this after taking such a widespread public mauling over what went to air. But while it might seem like they're rattled, crucially, they do still have friends in high places.
At the Tory party conference, they've proven rather popular.
My friends at GB News. And we need more GB News. Challenging the orthodoxy.
GB News determined to flourish in the future, but Laurence Fox won't be a part of those plans. Once an actor, now a provocateur who enjoys winding up what he would call the woke mob, he can now contemplate some unwelcome real-world consequences of his words. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
The families of the victims of nurse Lucy Letby have welcomed a police decision to investigate possible corporate manslaughter at the Countess of Chester Hospital where she worked. The 33-year-old former nurse was sentenced to a whole life order after she was convicted of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others. Tonight, Just Stop Oil protesters have shut down a theatre production in Westminster. 4 protesters stormed onto the stage during a performance of Les Miserables at the Sondheim Theatre. 4 people dressed in T-shirts saying the show can't go on locked themselves to the set while holding bright orange banners saying Just Stop Oil. Caitlyn Jenner has spoken to Sky News ahead of a documentary laying bare the rise of the Kardashian family. Sky's Sarah Jane Mee asked Caitlyn whether she believed that trans women should compete in professional sporting events.
I have been very clear on this subject for the last couple of years, from the Leah Thomas thing, back in the U.S., in swimming. Trans women should not be competing in women's sports, bottom line. I realize that if you're going through a transition, you're going through that. There's some things you can do and some things you can't do.
New video shows the moment that an electric bus crashed off the side of a bridge near Venice, killing 21 people. Well, the bus was taking tourists from the island city of Venice to the Hugh camping ground on the mainland after a day of sightseeing. But it fell from an elevated street in the borough of Mestre and caught fire. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
This was a horrific scene, the worst road crash northern Italy has ever known. More than 20 people died in this bus, which was carrying groups of tourists. A newborn baby among those killed. Many others dreadfully injured. The question, how could this bus have fallen from the flyover high above? This CCTV footage gives some answer. You see the bus driving normally and then a glimpse as it veers off to the side and through the barrier. Today, the aftermath, a broken road and a shattered city.
I can tell you that I won't forget what I saw for the rest of my life. Seeing all those people crammed inside a bus down there, it's something you can't describe.
A criminal investigation has been launched with one abiding question. How could this happen?
Well, this is the exact point on the road where the bus careered off. There are no skid marks here, no signs of it trying to slow down, and it burst through 2 guardrails before plummeting over that edge and hitting the road below and catching fire. The extraordinary thing is not that people died here, but actually that people survived.
Venice attracts 23 million tourists each year. The victims of this crash included Ukrainians, Germans and Croatians. The city's police chief told me the crash scene had been apocalyptic.
It is a moment of great shock, of great pain, of great suffering, because Venice is the city of the world, of tourists who come here to admire the beauty.
It is only a couple of miles from the canals to the site of the crash, and yet it feels like a different world, one now haunted by a truly terrible accident. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Venice.
A man who prosecutors say masterminded the shooting of the hip-hop star Tupac Shakur in 1996 has appeared in court today. 60-year-old Dwayne Kiefer D. Davis is charged with murder and use of a deadly weapon. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner has been speaking to the rapper's brother, who's been waiting for this moment for 27 years.
It's a sight Tupac's family and millions of fans around the world doubted they'd ever see. 27 years after his killing, Dwayne Davis, a man long known to investigators, in court charged with murder. Tupac's brother Mo Preem can't believe there's finally a breakthrough.
I mean, the feeling was, it was a what? It was a really? It was a wow? 27 years is a long time. My daughter's 27. Any accountability at this point is good.
Tupac was 25 and rap music's brightest star when he was killed. He was shot 4 times from a car which pulled alongside his on the Las Vegas Strip. Davis had bragged for years about being involved in Tupac's murder. Some wonder then why it took so long to arrest him.
If this had have been a multi-nominated Grammy artist who was at the top of his game, but a white man, do you think this would have taken 27 years to solve?
No. No. It's just the nature of the beast. It's just the nature of the beast in America.
Mr. Davis. It is a question for the man who finally brought the case against Davis.
Would this have been solved more quickly if Tupac had been white?
We don't look at the color of a person's skin. We have a number of cold cases that excellent detectives work on every single day. And whether the person is white, black, red, blue, or green, we move based upon evidence and what we can present in a court of law.
Dwayne Davis asked in court that his arraignment be delayed until he can organise legal representation. He is expected, though, to plead not guilty. A trial and a long overdue examination of the facts in this case is on the horizon.
Bobby Ladd assisted the investigation at the time of Tupac's murder.
Gang cases are really, really difficult to solve. Las Vegas at the time really didn't know how to investigate gang crimes. With his self-admission and everybody's testimony now, I think they have enough to put him in jail on this one.
Tupac's loved ones will be watching closely. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Las Vegas.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Metro, the headline, Rishi, I'm on track for victory. Back with that in just a moment.
5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, reminder of our top stories this evening. Rishi Sunak has confirmed he is scrapping the high-speed rail line north of Birmingham as he delivers his conference speech with his wife by his side. Metro Bank has drawn up plans to raise hundreds of millions of pounds of new capital to strengthen its balance sheet. And Laurence Fox has spoken out this evening after being sacked from GB News on the same day as being arrested on suspicion of conspiring to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras. Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabel Denham, with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. So, to the front pages, as you might expect, one story dominating. And following Rishi Sunak's leader speech, the Metro headlines, "I'm on track for victory," as they detail how the Prime Minister promises to change Britain and win the next election. Well, the Financial Times says scrapping HS2 is a bid to paint Tories as the party of change. Sunak ignites Tory civil war. That's what The Guardian says about Sunak backflipping on HS2. In the Eye, the Prime Minister promises to reinvest the money saved from scrapping HS2 into other rail projects, as he put it. In the Telegraph, more fallout from the conference, with smoking to be effectively banned for future generations with phased age limits. Huge decisions, they say, to change Britain. While the Daily Mail is calling his announcements a bold and radical policy blitz to transform Britain. And the Daily Express agrees with the headline, "Game Changer, Rishi's radical policy blitz to fix Britain." In other news, the Daily Star reporting on supermarkets having to put security tags on toilet rolls. Oh, a reminder, by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head to our guests then. Kevin and Annabel are here. Straight to the Telegraph, in fact. Let's have a look at that. Huge decisions even to change Britain. Did it feel radical to you, Annabel?
I certainly think it was more radical than many people were expecting. There was a sense that perhaps Rishi would depend, and right up until the general election, on his competence, on proving that he could steady the ship, that he could halve inflation, perhaps have some economic growth, perhaps a small reduction in the waiting time to the NHS, and so on and so forth. But actually, he's come out and he's thrown down the gauntlet to Labour to see how they are going to respond to this suggestion that he's going to break from the 30-year consensus and from the status quo. The trouble is that really, when you look at the details of the speech, it's hard to see how scrapping HS2, a smoking ban, and A-levels, really setting out a vision for the country. What would 5 years of Rishi Sunak with a mandate for change really look like? I'm not sure that delegates or even the wider public are clear after today.
You look like you've swallowed a fly, to be honest with you. You sit there listening.
I agree with a lot of that analysis, actually, but it's very hard to pretend you're the change after your party has been in power for 13 years, next election 14 years. Are you going to disown everything that happened? There were kind of three things in that speech, really, wasn't there? Now, replacing A-levels in England's been kicked around a long time. Might be a good idea, might be a bad idea, but it would take a very long time to do. The smoking ban, the New Zealand style, raising the age, I quite like that, but there'll be a lot in his own party, people, libertarians like you, Annabel, who would think that was wrong. But what will he be remembered for? Scrapping HS2. That's what he'll be remembered.
But what is the temptation of the hundreds of other transport projects where the money could be delivered more swiftly? Because this wouldn't have been delivered for nearly 20 years, as he put it.
Yeah, rather like he said, one of the things he's going to deliver is the Manchester Metro link tram to the airport. Well, it already goes there. It has for several years. Let's go through the integrated transport plan, other proposals, and see how many of these have been mentioned before. But of course, what he hopes is give out some goodies to local areas, and the challenge then for Labour is, do you go ahead with that? If you're going to spend the money on those plans, then how could you then go ahead with HS2, which I don't think Labour is officially committed to, but the party will be torn over that. But that's what he'll be remembered for. It didn't feel like a great vision. It didn't feel like a great game changer. It felt like spreadsheet Sunak, going through a few policies which weren't very coherent. If you put them all together, what have you got? You haven't got a big radical change.
Even though tonight, as we saw, David Cameron tweeted, today's decision on HS2 is the wrong one. It will help to fuel the views of those who argue that we can no longer think or act for the long term as a country, that we're heading in the wrong direction. Boris Johnson then obviously reposted that and says, I agree. So he's got two former prime ministers who are against him, therefore already starting to look like a change candidate from them, isn't he?
Yeah, I thought Beth Rigby put that quite right, but also shows they're divided. But what are you changing on? You're changing on a big infrastructure project in which now you've really wasted a lot of money because you haven't followed it through. So if not all change is good.
No,
remember, you can have change for the worse, which I think scrapping HS2 is.
But generally, the whole point about railing against 30 years of political status quo, that he was the agent for change, I sensed as he goes through these projects, right from the Windsor Framework on Northern Ireland, the idea of HS2, which he said he'd spent weeks and months looking at in detail, that he's a bit of a management consultant. So describing himself as the candidate for change, stroke the agent for change, is right. Does he appear like a management consultant to you?
Yes, technocrat is the accusation that's often levelled against him. And, it's quite awkward for Rishi Sunak because, really, if he wanted to shake up the status quo, what he wouldn't do is go and announce yet more plans that cannot be delivered. I mean, does anybody believe that we're going to have better links between northern conurbations in the next 2 to 3 years? No, it probably won't happen until 2040, and it will probably cost 5 times as much as we're estimating now. If he really wanted to break the status quo, he would be implementing radical policies from today, or at least when Parliament returns, instead of plans, proposals, a shake-up of A-levels. That would take years to roll out. I think back in 2003, when the Tomlinson review happened and they were looking at reforming A-levels, they had a 10-year time frame for it. And Rishi might not even have a year.
And the slogan up there was long-term decisions for a brighter future. Well, HS2 was a long-term project. He's just pulled for a slower future.
6 years of construction.
This was really all about short-term decisions for Rishi Sunak's future, in the hope that, from his point of view, he can salvage his premiership and claw back. I think the latest opinion poll today, it was this morning, so before his speech, was 19% high. There was one that showed the Labour lead only 10% a few days ago. That seems to be a bit of an outlier. So that's what it was about. But is he going to win back the public? Where were the radical ideas on the economy and the cost of living crisis? Where were they on the NHS? The two biggest concerns people have. Often in polling, you see the boats come up as third. Where were the new ideas on? There weren't any. Where was the change on any of those areas? There wasn't any.
Well, it's always interesting to see how the right-leaning papers took the speech. Here we go. The PM's common sense revolution, pride in family, pride in Britain, pride in the party of aspiration and genuine diversity. He talked about his front bench, didn't he? And an unequivocal statement that a man is a woman. A man is a man.
Go on, that was quite a speech he made when he said a man's a woman. He embraced change, modern Britain and the world. That's how he did it. Yeah, his conversion to trans rights. So we'll have to welcome that.
A man is a man and a woman is a woman. Apologies. Anyway, they're basically saying saving us from Keir's wokery, which had been a theme of the few days of the conference, had it not as well.
Yeah, but I'm old enough to remember the Daily Mail when it was fully behind Boris Johnson, and then it was fully behind Liz Truss and a budget, which didn't go too well, and they were quite hostile to Rishi Sunak. But of course, on some areas, he has moved towards Truss positions, unquestionably. And so he's now got the Mail, which is still a very powerful voice, paper people can fear if you're on the wrong side of its anger, he'll be pleased the Mail is back in his camp. Or, or he's in the Mail's camp.
Some of his rhetoric was perhaps more powerful and resonated more with traditional Tory voters than the specific policies that he was announcing. So it's not surprising that there are favourable headlines on the cover of some of the papers. And, you know, when it comes to the NHS, when it comes to the boats, when it comes to the cost of living crisis, arguably he let his Home Secretary, he let his Health Secretary, he let his Chancellor come out and speak on those issues. And the problem, of course, that Rishi had was that there was a leak early on in the conference about the scrapping of the northern leg of HS2. And, I mean, how many times were we briefed that it was happening, it wasn't happening, it was happening again? 9, was it, over the course of the conference? So that rather took the wind out of his sails.
Well, yesterday, he was in interviews, he was saying, oh, God, they've got to really study this. I'm the man who has to look at all the figures and make them. I can't announce it now. And then look at that, less than 24 hours later, he can't announce it.
Well, he had to brief his cabinet, I suppose, didn't he? The Metro... Rishi, I'm on track for victory. The PM scraps HS2. He tells the Tories it's time for change. New exams plus a law to end generation of children smoking. Tax cuts, but not yet. You know, another area of difficulty. But I want to go to the
tax at the, is it post-war record high?
Yeah.
People will be worse off at the next election than they were at the last one.
We'll talk about that in a moment, but I do want to you know, talk about the eye and something that you mentioned, which is the gauntlet thrown down to Labour about what they now choose to fund and how expensive, if they fund everything, it could be for them. It could be a monstrous bill, couldn't it?
Yeah, we won't really know the state of politics and the battlefield for the election until at the end of next week, when this time next week, when Labour's had its conference. Normally Labour goes before the Conservatives, but not this time. I think it was a booking cock-up that resulted in this. But anyway,
they could have swapped location. It might have been easier.
I know. You get the last word, and Labour have now got something to attack because Sunak's made his speech. So it's harder for the Tories this time. But of course, the challenge here, I think, what the eye is referring to is if you have that HS2 money, which is now said to be going to spent around the country. Are Labour going to say they're not going to do those projects wherever they are? And if they say that, then are they going to say they're going to do HS2 as well? And then where would you get the money for that? So I can see there's a big choice for Labour. And it's also in the Labour Party, about HS2, it's who you ask, because you have different answers on whether they're going to go ahead with it or not. Andy Street, the Tory mayor of West Midlands, seems to have been bought off by the government. He was screaming blue murder about cancelling HS2. Now he's sort of nodded it through. Wow. I suspect Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester mayor, will be a little tougher proposition for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at the Manchester Evening News, shall we? Effectively suggesting it's all broken promises. Back to George Osborne. The reality is that HS2 is a vital investment. It will change the economic geography of the country. Question is how you do that now without that. And you know, the suggestion is that, you know, you've got Zoom and Teams and all the other mechanisms for having meetings. You don't need this route up the country, the T-bar they talk about. You know, you've chopped off that bit, you can still do that bit across the country in terms of transport.
Well, I don't think there was ever really a strong economic case for HS2 to begin with before a single spade had even gone into the ground. And that much was clear because there was no private sector involvement. The private sector looked at HS2 and thought they didn't want anything to do with it. And I think that was a pretty strong indicator.
How did it ever, you know, roll through then?
Yeah, but
It's an idea that it would level up the country. But, of course, if you look at the high-speed rail line to Darlington, actually, what that did was lead to more people from Darlington coming down to London rather than incentivising people to move out of the capital into
Annabelle, if we'd have relied on the private sector for HS1, the link from St Pancras to the Channel Tunnel, it wouldn't have happened because it went bust when it was being built. It had to be nationalised, publicly run, and now it's a huge success. The private sector is not always the answer. I know the public sector isn't always the answer, but that's why this line had to be built
but I mean,
publicly.
I think in the case of HS2, it's absolutely apparent that the economic case is completely imploded. And it's, of course, been exacerbated, like you say, Anna, by lockdowns and the fact that commuter travel still hasn't recovered to pre-pandemic levels.
Some lines it
has. And I think, ultimately, it was probably needlessly ambitious, the speed that they wanted it to go at. They underestimated how much it was going to cost and the amount of resistance they would get from
the NIMBYs want tunnels everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tunnels, aren't there, I think, on the way to Birmingham. Somebody gave a time for how many times during daylight. It's not actually very long. Anyway, lots more still to come, including from the front of The Guardian, the headline, England, most difficult place to find a home. That and more after this.
First of all, Dal, I'll come to you. How would this be useful for police? And presumably there would be strict rules and parameters within which something like this could be used.
There would be. In terms of how useful it would be, I mean, my passport photo looks nothing like me. It was taken 9 years ago. So I think there's some practical issues here around the accuracy of images. But I think it's important to have checks and balances, but it's not unusual for different government agencies to share information to stop fraud, prevent crime, and that happens already. I think what's important is to have appropriate checks and balances in place.
We're against these proposals because they are a really frightening development. It's a huge expansion of the government and the police's ability to spy on us, each and every one of us, as we go about our daily lives. We've seen this time and time again, the government use any social issue of the day to justify an expanded surveillance regime. And I think we have to see it for what it is. It's an attempt to distract us from their own failures in the lead up to the general election. And the reality is that tech won't solve our societal structural issues, and certainly not dodgy tech that is renowned for misidentifying people and will ultimately sweep countless people into the criminal justice system.
Well, I think Emmanuel's right, and I think the difficulty is there is a concern about trust in the police, and it's, in fact, trust in the police has never been lower. It's the lowest level it's ever been, and among certain communities, for example, black communities, it's even lower than the general community. So I understand that concern.
I have immense empathy for shop workers that are having to deal with this problem day in and day out, and for people that have been harmed by these issues. But unfortunately, we're being presented with a solution that doesn't even work. We know how this technology is unreliable. And of course, people need to be safe at work, in their homes, but a gross invasion of our privacy is simply not the answer.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview once again, joined by Kevin Maguire and Annabelle Denham. I'm going to show you a quick look at the Times, which we hadn't had before. Son of a pharmacist casts himself as Thatcher's heir alongside his wife Akshata. A good thing, bad thing? You liked it or didn't like her appearance today?
I liked it. I can appreciate that some people will feel it was saccharine and staged, But I thought it gave Rishi a sort of a human side that has been lacking. He seems to, over the last 12 months, have become increasingly robotic. And this was a reminder of his commitment to his family, to his country, the duty that he quite obviously feels. And I thought she delivered it. I thought she delivered it so well. She was charming and confident.
Yeah.
And
don't mention she's an heiress in a cost of living crisis. No, I thought it was quite sweet. I'm sure she's a very nice woman. I don't believe when she said, "Oh, he doesn't know what I'm going to say." That'll have all been gloriously scripted. But if he thinks it's going to save him, I just mentioned that when Sarah Brown introduced Gordon Brown, I think it was twice, 2008, then 2009. Everybody said it's really lovely.
Somebody else who hadn't been chosen.
Yeah, really.
Somebody else who'd had a coronation for the job.
And it was really nice, and it made no difference at all once she got the post.
In fact, 1 year later, it made no difference, did it? Let's go to The Guardian, shall we? England, the most difficult place to find a home. Many people suggesting, actually, that the no mention of housing in Rishi Sunak's speech was quite interesting. But what's this, Annabelle, what's this article saying?
Yes, well, this is data from the Home Builders Federation. It says that England has the lowest percentage of vacant homes per capita in the OECD, and around a quarter of private renters are spending more than 40% of their income on renting a home, which is a shocking statistic. So little disposable income left for anything else, for saving or indeed spending. And of course, you know, just bringing it back to Conservative Party conference to Rishi Sunak. So now you're 25 and you can't smoke, but you can't buy a home and you probably can't rent a home either.
But the interest rates are smoking out private landlords because of policy changes brought in by George Osborne during the austerity years as Chancellor. So that's partly what's biting there.
Yeah, to stop them basically, the loans, writing them all off against tax. So if, houses were built and they went up for sale, they were all bought by private landlords and then were being rented out. So no other people could buy it. I know I can feel you're going to explode on this. But there is a housing crisis in the UK. There's more than 1 million people on social waiting lists. And what has Sunak done as the change man? He's scrapped the housing targets.
I think that landlords...
he is part of the problem here.
I think that landlords are just the convenient whipping boy for successive Conservative governments. They're a boogeyman or woman of the British economy, and there's this assumption that they can just be clobbered and regulations piled on them, and that this won't have consequence. And all it is doing is forcing more and more landlords to leave the sector, and that means that prices are going to go up.
Well, let's buy them up then. Let's give the tenants a right to buy. And nationalise them. Yeah, that's great. Expand the public, housing association and council sector. I agree with you.
OK, we didn't get to the Daily Star and the tagged toilet rolls. Perhaps we can do that next time. Kevin, Annabelle, thank you both very much indeed. We will see you for the 11 right now, the weather.